But it's something the artists call a haptic, view. My wife told me about that. My wife, Kate, she, observe all things. And that is a half view of things, haptic. And that's what people were looking at. And sometimes you don't look at the shadows, because the shadows can tell you more about the position of the person than anything. How close they are to the light, maybe even how tall they are, because tall people cast long shadows, okay? So everything they said was true based on what they saw. But I went out and started talking to folks in the community, and of course I studied the history, so I knew her husband, Mr. Sam Boynton, was a founder of the Voters League. And so this woman was solid. She was strong, and she was determined, tall and regal, and had a perpetual smile on her face. So she was not a mean-spirited person at all. And she really adopted that whole spirit of nonviolence. She would tell the truth about, how the white folks behaved, but she didn't have any venom towards them, And at the same time, she was aware of how some black folks didn't trust themselves. So you couldn't trust them.
Okay.
But she didn't have, but she believed there was hope for them, And so you have to understand why people behave the way they do. Some people look at themselves as being powerless and pitiful. Now their reaction sometimes is that they overreact because they want to get attention, they want to feel powerful, okay? But see, ultimately, at the base of it, they don't feel too good about themselves, okay? It's the way they think other people look at them, because they're not sure whether or not they see themselves as accurately as other folk. So they always overcompensate.
Okay.
They do things to try to, make a splash, or try to rise above the situation to get attention. Okay? And that's what was happening in Selma, Alabama, with some of the people. And I'm so embarrassed to tell you this, but there were some ministers who were afraid to speak to me on the street.
Now that's interesting, because Mrs. Boynton tells us the story all the time of people who would cross the street. If the Boyntons were walking down the street, they would cross the street and tell them that those folks don't like you and I don't like you neither, because it's going to get me in trouble if I be on the same side.
Exactly.
Did you uncover that?
Yes.
As a reality?
Yes. And I think this is what the teams that went before me experienced. And that's why they came back and say you can't get anything accomplished here. It was in the air. It was thick. I had a retired postman who told me, and he was sitting on the porch, and I used to just walk down the street and stop and talk to people, sit on the porch and talk. So that's where we used to, visit, on the porch. And he told me, he said, son, you have come to the wrong place to try to accomplish what you want to accomplish. He said, tell you right now, good advice, you won't accomplish anything here. He said, I've been all over the world, and there's no place like this place here. And
what did that do to your spirit? Did that dampen your spirit, or did that motivate you and charge you up to want to be more determined?
Well, I became really more curious.
Okay.
That was, I'll be honest with you, that was the thing that drove me. It was wanting to know why. I mean, they were human beings. They ate like we did. And, after all, you had Montgomery, which was just a few miles away. Are these black folks any different from those black folks? You had Birmingham up there. Now, these, they're larger cities than Selma, but after all, a lot of those folks came from these rural areas and migrated to these cities, that kind of thing.
Before you go on, let me ask you this. Where did you get the initial, the ground-rooted true grit from? to want to take on that kind of challenge and with the nerve to walk into a hellhole like that with the kind of confidence that you espouse?
Well, my grandmother had a lot to do with my upbringing, okay, like a lot of folk. So I'm one of those who was reared by grandmama too. And my parents were always there. She raised them too, along with me. Okay.
Okay.
But
so you walked up on Mrs. Boynton then, and here's Grandma standing up there again with
absolutely.
the same kind of audacity and guts, right?
And what I saw Grandmama do, I knew what Mrs. Boynton would do. Yes. I never put it that way before, but that's really it. You asked a good question there. My motto is that when the going gets tough, tough gets going.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if it's a tough situation, I get more curious about, you know, how you can change it. So I was determined that this situation could be changed. And one of the things that convinced me was Mrs. Boynton and Mrs. Foster and Attorney Chestnut. Okay? They were there struggling and they were believing. And then I had the occasion to go to the nursing home to visit Mr. Sam Boynton. And Mrs. Boynton used to stay up at night, you know, because he was ill in the nursing home and he was terminal. And I used to relieve her by, you know, saying, well, you go home and get some rest. You know, I'll stay up. I don't have anything to do. I'll just stay here, sit by the bed, you know, read and pray, you know, and just nice and quiet. Meditate. It was a good time to meditate, you know. And there's a strange thing that happened. I felt the presence of his spirit